Warm welcome, everybody, to the Saphira Center of Shamanism YouTube channel, where we break down the ancient esoteric practices of shamanism and the occult, bringing them into balance with the deep psyche. My name is Luke, experienced practitioner and mentor of the shamanic and occult sciences. It is an honor to have you here with me as always. Definitely check out the links within the description of this video if you have interest in joining my membership programs or working with me one-to-one through mentoring or healing. First link for my premium service, lots of very powerful webinars and initiatory rituals up and coming. Definitely check that out if you are ready and willing to dive deep into your evolutionary process using the shamanic and occult technologies. Check out the second link for the Patreon, an amazing opportunity to gain access to lots of extremely powerful pieces of exclusive content at just a small monthly subscription. And check out the third link if you are interested in working with me one-on-one. I look forward to seeing you over there. So today we're going to be speaking about the Dark Night of the Soul, the infamous Dark Night of the Soul. Okay, this is something that many people go through, particularly in today's day and age, whereby the collective energies are shifting so significantly. Dark Night of the Soul is something that is being described more and more, but there is, generally speaking, a very big misunderstanding as to what a Dark Night of the Soul actually is. First and foremost, I will start by saying that the term Dark Night of the Soul is probably one of the most projected upon terms within the new age. Okay, many people say that they're going through a dark night of the soul and in a lot of ways actually latch on to the label and the mask of being in a dark night of the soul. And for me, what I see playing out with a lot of people is that it's often a mechanism for the false self, for the ego, to actually refuse accountability. Okay, a dark night of the soul is an initiatory process that unfolds as a result of a number of different implications. It can be life events, illnesses, bereavements, anything that causes a drastic shift in your energetic resonance, anything that causes a drastic shift in energy and perspective can initiate a dark night of the soul. And this is basically where you fall into a place of existential crisis, spiritual dissociation, and desolation. Okay, it's often accompanied by a lot of feelings of dissolution. Okay, it's basically a big shift whereby what once was isn't anymore. And it basically describes a point in which a person can lose touch with their purpose for being here and what it is that they are really supposed to be doing. They can lose touch with their true will. They can lose touch with their real intent. And what often happens as a result of this is somebody can stagnate, they can resist the process instead of actually allowing themselves to dive into it. Okay, a dark night of the soul is a potent initiatory process that needs to be surrendered to. You need to surrender and allow yourself to fall into the abyss. Okay, the problem is when you are trying to hold on to the edge of the abyss. Okay, the dark night of the soul initiates stagnation and potential re-traumatization if you are not willing to flow with the current of change. Okay, and a dark night of the soul is basically a radical call to shift something drastic within your life. Okay, to go into repressed trauma, to really reassess how you have been living your life and taking accountability and being honest with yourself, how in harmony that way that in which you were living your life was with your true soul's essence and how sustainable it realistically was. Okay, so we're going to be diving in to the subject of Dark Night of the Soul, discussing some of the things and some of the triggers that can initiate a Dark Night of the Soul type of process, as well as looking at some of the best ways that you can approach a Dark Night of the Soul and how you can navigate it effectively. This is going to be a very important subject for anybody who is on a deep healing and evolutionary process, particularly for those who are wanting to dive into deep esoteric based initiatory systems, as these systems do have a tendency to initiate a type of spiritual death, repetitive spiritual death, particularly if we're referring to shamanic or occult initiation. A dark night of the soul type of experience is something that you are most likely going to encounter numerous times in your evolutionary process. So it's important that you are basically equipped to be able to navigate it effectively. So definitely stay tuned as we dive in to the dark night of the soul. So a dark night of the soul refers specifically, when we look at it from an evolutionary point of view, it refers specifically to an initiation that is sent by your true will as a call to shift into greater harmony with one's truth and authenticity. This can come through in many different ways, and it's important to realize that the term dark night of the soul gets used interchangeably. It really depends on who's using the term. I've heard occultists use the word dark night of the soul to describe what they call a second death. And the second death refers to the exile / death of one's truth and authenticity, causing someone to actually fall backwards into their false self, into their falsehood, into coping mechanisms, and end up living the life of an NPC, which is a non-playable character, those characters that appear in video games that are just predefined programs. You can't actually play as them with your own playable sovereignty. The second death is a way of describing what happens if somebody resists their dark night of the soul. Okay, if you resist the dark night of the soul and you try and hold on to who you were before this initiatory process, then that is going to put enormous strain on your nervous system and on your body, and is going to make the process needlessly difficult and realistically quite re-traumatizing. So a dark night of the soul is somewhat of an identity reset. An identity reset that can come through in the form of existential crisis, spiritual dissociation, desolation, dissolution of who you thought that you were. It is the ultimate rupture of your old self. And this can happen in numerous different ways. I've seen dark night of the soul type of experiences be initiated for those who just start doing simple shadow work. Somebody starts doing shadow work, trauma integration work, that can initiate what you call a dark night of the soul, because what you're doing by making the decision to go into your trauma is that you are saying to your soul, I'm ready to go and do this. And then what can happen is that it can then uproot a lot of repressed energy that you may not know how to deal with. This can happen very easily through esoteric based initiation. Okay, so occult initiation, particularly dark occult initiation like the Qliphoth and other initiatory systems like that, the same with shamanic initiation, can initiate a type of dark night of the soul, whereby you basically have your old self, your identity completely ruptured, and you have to learn who you are beyond that. Okay, some people can just refer to the dark night of the soul as a spiritual awakening, whereby they have a surge of life force that basically causes a huge dismantling of who they thought they were, a huge dismantling of their old foundations that have been previously holding up their sense of self. What you'll find for many people is that a dark night of the soul is initiated by an event that seems external. Okay, an example of this is, say, a relationship. Sometimes somebody's call to change on the soul level can come through in the form of a relationship that can initiate either a pull towards vulnerability or somebody to revert back into their shell. I've heard of people manifesting relationship dynamics that cause so much disorientation and rupture that it completely retracts their lives and what they choose to do with themselves after. Bereavements can cause a dark night of the soul type of experience as well. Not because of the death of the actual individual, but because the death of the individual, the loved one, family member, the friend, whoever, triggers the death of the foundations of you or of the person in which that person was holding up through their mere existence, which then causes people who have gone through a bereavement to then have to basically relearn, to learn who they are within their lives whilst that person is not here in the physical anymore. Illnesses, okay, diagnosis. This is one of the biggest initiators of a dark night of the soul because it is often a drastic ending of life as it was, and then a rebirth of a new life, which may not on the surface be actually desired, but may actually be needed for one's soul evolution. So there are many different ways that a dark night of the soul can be initiated. Often it is through an external event. Lockdown is a collective event that can be seen as a dark night of the soul. You know, lockdown, wars, things like that that unfold on the collective consciousness can trigger individual and collective dark nights of the soul, whereby the collective then has to rebuild itself in accordance with greater truth and authenticity. The caveat with a dark night of the soul is that you have free will. So basically, you can flow with the energies or you can flow against the energies. And which choice that you make is going to be highly dependent on you. A dark night of the soul manifests often as a result of repressed trauma. Okay, a load of repressed trauma that needs to be processed or integrated, or as a big call to basically retrack one's life into greater truth and authenticity. Okay, a dark night of the soul often causes someone to question how authentic they have been, how sustainable the way that they were living their life before actually is for their ongoing soul evolution, and things like that. It's a deeply contemplative time that needs to be surrendered to. Because it's a process that is initiated by both your unconscious mind and your true will as a call to drastic change, your false self, your ego, your egoic structures that have been established to hold you in a place that feels comfortable in order to keep yourself safe, is going to resist the dark night of the soul, which basically means that the majority of people that do go through a dark night of the soul end up resisting the whole process and then re-traumatizing themselves many times over. For example, if I start going through a dark night of the soul, it's very easy to actually use this term as a mechanism to hide from greater truth and authenticity. I see it all the time with people who are claiming to go through this type of experience, and they're basically just hiding behind it. They're hiding behind the label of the dark night of the soul and using it as a reason not to move forward. They're using it as a reason to stay in their coping mechanisms and are very much approaching it from a victim space. So a dark night of the soul is always going to linger if you resist the process, okay? It's like, think of like you have to fall into the abyss. You have to hit rock bottom in order to then rebuild yourself, okay? In other words, you have to become the ash before you can become the phoenix that rises from it. And people don't understand that, okay? People start going through their death and rebirth process. They go through the deconstruction, which feels extremely uncomfortable for the ego, because the purpose of it is to dismantle aspects of the false self, to dismantle aspects of the ego so that it can be somewhat matured and molded into a greater image of one's truth and authenticity. And guess what? After that, it's going to happen again. It's going to happen again. It's going to happen again. The dark night of the soul, if you actually want to grow as a person, is an inevitable thing. You have to encounter it if you are to really grow into your truth and authenticity, because you have to witness shamanic death. You have to go through symbolic death, energetic death many times over if you are to continue to evolve as a person. And this goes completely against the system that we have been brought up in. The famous midlife crisis. Okay, many people report having a midlife crisis, which is basically where their life as to who they were, who they think they are, completely ruptures, and it only happens once or twice within their path. Okay, what basically happens is that they build a patriarchal structure, they build a tower of a solid concrete structure that is based off of how they think that their life needs to be, and then they realize that that's no longer in resonance, and then their soul calls them to change, and then the whole tower comes crashing down, and then they rebuild it again, and then it happens maybe once or twice within their evolutionary path. The key to really embracing this experience is to actually throw yourself into it. Okay, it's a paradox here. You throw yourself into it and embrace the chaos. You are going to basically be able to navigate that in a much better way because you are willing to face it. Whereas if you are not willing to face it and you do what the patriarchal system has programmed you to do, and that stick to false order and false light and avoid anything that is merely chaotic, and avoid anything that is a threat to your pre-constructed tower of righteousness, then you're going to be forced into a dark night of the soul if your true will demands change in order to begin that initiatory process. Okay, and you can either resist that process and be re-traumatized by that life event, like most people do, or you can use it as an opportunity to dive into deeper evolution. And it can be difficult. I'm not saying it's not difficult. Okay, and I don't necessarily blame people in the sense that we've all been programmed to avoid chaos, which means that the dark night of the soul, or the infamous death and rebirth process that a lot of us have actually volunteered to go through because we're here at this very transformational point in humanity. Many people still have that old programming of avoiding chaos, and we have to stick to feeling good and stick to feeling happy all the time. And everything from the therapeutic system to the spiritual community is built towards helping people feel better instead of actually dealing with their shit. That is what causes people to be re-traumatized by their dark night of the soul, because they think that what they're going through is bad, and therefore they try and resist the chaos and resist the so-called negative emotions that start to come to the surface. So basically, a dark night of the soul is a call to hit rock bottom. You have to let yourself fall into the abyss. You have to completely let go. Okay, and if you try and hold on to your righteousness and you try and hold on to the idea of knowing, then it's going to become more difficult, more and more difficult, more and more difficult, and then the more rupture you are going to manifest within your day-to-day life. Okay, the more rupture you're going to manifest, the more chaos has to manifest in the collective in order to force that change. Whereas if you are actually facing the chaos consciously and going into the dark night of the soul consciously and are embracing every feeling that is coming to the surface as a result of it, and are willing to actually sit with the trauma and deal with the trauma instead of try and avoid it or try and suppress it or fall into coping mechanisms, then that is going to remove the need for the chaos to manifest as rupture within your day-to-day life. Okay, rupture only happens extensively within the external world if you are not looking at your stuff, and it does happen to all of us from time to time. We have an unconscious mind that is infinitely vast. We cannot see everything that is within our nervous system. So often situations do have to be brought in to dismantle falsehood via the external world in order for deeper levels of vulnerability to be initiated. And the external world plays an extremely important role in this initiatory process. Okay, the external world is somewhat of an archetype for what is going on within your own individual unconscious mind. So what you're experiencing around you is there specifically to give you the information and give you the information and the data and the downloads that you need to be able to inform your growth towards your soul's evolutionary path, towards what your true will actually wants. But the issue is that many people fall victim to the circumstance. They don't see the bigger picture, so they fall victim to what is apparently happening outside of them. They fall victim to the very feelings that they are feeling, and they do everything in their power to try and feel better and everything in their power to try and avoid the rupture because they feel that they know who they are. To really navigate a dark night of the soul, you need to be okay with not knowing who you are. You need to be okay with being lost. You need to be okay with not knowing what the path forward is going to be. Okay. And particularly if you engage in initiatory processes that are there specifically to take you through these types of experiences time and time again, then you're inevitably going to face this. Okay. For example, in the Qliphothic process, I myself faced numerous what I could have easily referred to through labels as dark night of the soul. And if I'd done what most people do and hide behind the label and use it as a reason to avoid my stuff, then I would have been re-traumatized significantly by that experience. But the whole purpose of a lot of these types of esoteric-based initiations is to actually teach you how to use your emotions, how to work with them, and not fall victim to them, which means that it trains you to navigate chaos. It trains you to actually approach soul's evolution from a co-creator perspective. Okay, people think that evolution comes from ease. It does not come from ease. Evolution often comes through challenge. Doesn't have to come through suffering. Bear in mind, there's a misconception. Evolution does not have to induce suffering, but it does have to induce challenge. You do have to be challenged, and often you do need experiences that are there specifically to rupture who you thought you were, to push you into who you are supposed to be growing into. Okay, and shamanic initiation and occult initiation are amazing ways to help you to navigate these things that you are going to have to inevitably face at some capacity regardless. Okay, particularly with the energies that you encounter within the Qliphoth or within similar types of occult initiation, you're going to have to face those energies one way or another, whether you face them unconsciously or you face them consciously. Okay, it basically means that these energies are going to be governing your life unless you choose unless you actually make the conscious decision to dive into them head first and actually let yourself fall. You have to let yourself fall to be able to navigate a dark night of the soul. You have to be okay with the veils being pulled over you. You have to be okay with navigating the labyrinth of your unconscious mind. And basically, what this initiatory process kickstarts is being able to see in the dark, being able to see with your heart instead of with your physical, tangible vision and with illusions of clarity. Okay, going through this process is essential for your evolution, is essential for your growth. And the more you resist it, the more you hold on to righteousness, the more you hold on to your falsehood, the more difficult and re-traumatizing it is going to get. So you have a choice, basically. Either you face chaos head on and befriend chaos and welcome it as a necessary current of your soul's evolution, or you resist it and be completely re-traumatized by your life events. And the latter, unfortunately, is the majority of humanity because they are still holding on to these programs of needing to feel good. As long as you're feeling happy, that's the main thing. When you really dive into yourself on a deep level, it's not as simple as, oh yeah, I need to be happy. Oh yeah, I need to feel okay. Oh yeah, I need to do this, which in itself shatters the illusion of the therapeutic world, shatters the illusion of the new age, which is built to help people cope instead of actually dive into their emotions and feel them. So, a dark night of the soul, I cannot stress it enough, is a necessary initiatory process to undergo for many people. You can label it as a dark night of the soul and use it as a reason to hide and stagnate within that space, or you can embrace it, let go, and allow yourself to fall. Guaranteed, you will come out of it. Okay, the reason for that is because psychologically, this is how the mind works. Think of what a dark night of the soul is there to do. It initiates rupture of the false self, a rupture of the ego through an external circumstance or initiatory process. It ruptures the false self, at which point the crisis, in terms of not knowing, is the ego scrambling for an identity. So once you are okay with not having an identity, mask, label, or anything to define your sense of self by, you can relax into the void space and use it as an opportunity to become. The void, which is initiated by, or the void consciousness that is initiated by the dark night of the soul, is a paradox. Okay, you realize when you really go through enough of these experiences and actually face them in a way that's actually co-creative and takes accountability for itself, you ultimately understand that there is a paradox to it. Okay, the chaos comes in, and when you embrace chaos, you are embracing new order that comes on the other side of that. When you let yourself become the ash and you embrace the burning away, the purification process that is absolutely essential for you to grow into your truth and authenticity, you are embracing the phoenix that is on the other side of that. Just the same as if you hold on to order, you are actually opening yourself up to more chaos in doing so. Okay, there is a paradox here. Okay, if you embrace order, you are opening yourself up to chaos. If you embrace chaos, you are opening yourself up to new order that comes on the other side of that. Okay, which means when you embrace the dissolution and you let yourself become nothing and you let yourself navigate without needing to see through only your feelings and your body sensations, without needing to know who you are, without needing to know what you need to do in order to define your sense of self by, to hold your feelings and hold your inner child, then you are opening yourself up to a new order, and new clarity will come on the other side of that once you have embraced the deconstruction process. Okay, so the dark night of the soul comes in, dismantles the false self, causes an ego death or a type of ego dissolution, which then the ego is searching for its identity. Once you embrace that unknowing and unmaking process, eventually you will find an identity to latch onto. Eventually, your ego will settle and it will be like, okay, it's now matured itself. It's now matured itself and it's able to settle with a new identity, and therefore the new order has been established. But you're going to go through another rupture process at some point. It's not about expecting it. It's about embracing the order, but in doing so, understand that you are going to change. You as a person are going to inevitably change, at which point you are going to go through another death whereby your ego is going to be scrambling for its identity because it doesn't know who it is anymore, because everything about what it was has been ruptured by this call from the true will to align to greater authenticity. Then you embrace the unknowing, you embrace the unmaking, you embrace the vulnerability, you embrace the emotions, and you don't try and hold on to what is being deconstructed. Then the order will come, the clarity will come. Okay, it's a fluid process. The emotions are fluid. The psyche is the primordial water. The unconscious mind is the deep primordial waters that flow. Okay, when we're going through something, it can feel like it's eternal. It can feel like it's forever because the ego wants to avoid where it is. Okay, this is the thing. It wants to avoid accountability and it wants to separate itself from the suffering. So what's it going to do? It's going to do everything in its power, unless you are aware of it. It's going to do everything in its power to try and avoid the suffering for the very simple reason that it's trying to protect you. But if you avoid those very simple feelings, if you avoid the feelings that your soul is trying to initiate you into and get you to feel, then more rupture will take place. Okay, and the more repressed your energies are within your unconscious mind, the more of them are going to be birthed into the world around you through the recurring patterns, recurring relationships, recurring problems time and time again. What some people do is that they are fed up of this and then they detach themselves completely and then live a life completely isolated within their own shell. And that is also not sustainable either in that respect, because then you're avoiding accountability by holding yourself within a narcissistic bubble. Okay, you're avoiding accountability that comes through the external world, and you're trying to potentially avoid those dark night of the soul experiences. And that is another way that can trigger rupture in other ways, whether it's rupture in the living situation, rupture in your health. Things like that are all drastic calls towards change. It doesn't mean that going through a dark night of the soul and embracing the chaos is going to avoid illness. It doesn't mean that it's going to avoid bereavement. It's not about avoiding chaos. It's about welcoming chaos, knowing your sovereignty, and understanding that true sovereignty is not about knowing everything that's going to happen or living a life that's stress free, but is about understanding your own worth, your own power, so that you can navigate life's inevitable challenges and initiations. And the more you engage with your healing path, particularly if you get into occult initiation, good God, you are going to go through death after death after death after death. Death after death after death after death. You're not even going to know what's dying. You're not even going to know what's dying. And guess what? You're not going to know what's being reborn either. Get used to it. If you're wanting to go into these deeper initiatory paths, get used to it. Get used to the chaos. Embrace the chaos as you are paradoxically embracing the order that follows it. Okay, so be aware of those who hide behind the label of Dark Night of the Soul. Dark Night of the Soul. I keep going through the Dark Night of the Soul. I'm not going to grow. I'm a victim. Yeah, that's not alchemy. That is perpetual cycles, and that is validation of the false self. Okay, many people fall into that to fall into validation of, well, to basically try and validate the false self. So a dark night of the soul needs to be approached with openness, surrender, and a willingness to embrace the unknown, a willingness to face your emotions, and with a true understanding that you do not always know what your true will is. Doesn't matter how much occult initiation you go through, you will understand deeper layers of your true will the further along the path you go, but you're never going to be able to fully understand or comprehend all of it within a physical body. It's simply not possible to hold that level of potential. So if you think that you are this and you are this label or you are this person who does these things, you're limiting your own consciousness. You're limiting your own consciousness. So you need to be willing to let go of those things that you thought that you were, those things that you think that you are, and the constructs that have been holding up your sense of self. Okay, that is how you navigate a dark night of the soul, feeling your emotions, being present with your body sensations, and actually going in to the depth of what is being evoked within you. Okay, if you try and avoid it and you stick to coping mechanisms and you do everything in your power to avoid it, or you do what a lot of occultists and shamans do, and that's banish the energies that you don't want around, then it's not going to end well. It's just going to get worse and worse and worse and worse until something massive comes along to dismantle everything about who you were and force you into that change. Okay, if you don't do it in this lifetime, there'll be another lifetime to do it. Okay, and there'll be another one after that, because if you keep ignoring the true calling of your soul, you are building a perpetual karmic cycle that is going against the evolution of your soul. Okay, so the dark night is essential. You need it. You need to face it with openness and vulnerability. And my advice is also to is always to face it head on. Okay, this is why things like the Qliphoth exist. This is why shamanic initiation exists. This is why these things are coming into the collective, because a lot of the ways of coping within the external world is not effective. Okay, some of the worst dark nights of the soul that I've seen people go through are people who are, say, like trained doctors or trained therapists that are already holding on to so much programming of righteousness, and the programming is so tight to the point where they don't want to change anything at all, and they'd rather stay in their perpetual cycles. So just approach this with open arms, with an open heart, and be willing to tap into what is being evoked within you. Okay, it is a gift. It's a paradoxical gift from your soul that needs to be surrendered to, needs to be approached with vulnerability, and ultimately we need to understand its true purpose, and that is to help us evolve. Okay, so face the chaos head on, and you will be embracing the paradox. So I think that is everything that I needed to cover on the Dark Night of the Soul. Okay, very big subject, very, very big subject, but I think that's all I need to say. Definitely check out the links within the description of this video if you have interest in working with me. Definitely hit like and subscribe if this was helpful to you, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.